Good afternoon, I'm David Cragle. I'm General Counsel here at Reef, and hopefully you won't have to listen to me too many times during this series. I love to teach. It's sort of part of who I am and what I do on a daily basis. You hang around down in my office for very long, you're going to hear me teaching somebody something, whether they want to be taught or not. So it's kind of the nature of who I am. Our Chief Operating Officer, Jeff Holzman, is on the phone with us today. I've asked him to be along with us. I'll ask him to make some early opening remarks. When I'm finished here, I want to give you some just sort of general introduction, first of all, to the series, and then to what we're going to do today. So let's just run through what the series will hold. There'll be 10 sessions between now, every Friday at noon, between now and August 6th. I figured that would get most of you before you have to head back to school again. You'd be able to hear them all if you want. So here's what I have outlined right now, and this is open to, I'm completely open to discussion. I don't necessarily develop the itinerary, but here's what I thought we would do this summer. We'd go through a general overview today of who Reef Holdings is and what we do as we stand here today, what we're involved in, the breadth of what we do, and our departments. There are a lot of departments and there are a lot of people doing a lot of things. And all of it's extremely important. Actually, I have a book in my office that I wanted to bring in here and show you, but I'll talk about the one example I wanted to give you in a second. But so what we do today, we'll take an overview of Reef Holdings, who we are, what we do, and the departments, and what the departments, each of the departments generally do, and we'll finish up with a Q&A at the end. If you got questions, you kind of know where you're working, you may not know where other people are working, those sorts of things. We'll try to give you an opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers if we can give them to you. What are we going to do during the sessions for the next 10 weeks? Let me give you just general thoughts on what I think is going to happen over the next 10 weeks. And I'll give them to you in the order in which I think they should occur, because in my mind, I'm an ordinal guy. I have a master's in accounting and my JD was in tax and commercial. I'm not a litigator. I'm a business guy. I was in business before I went back to grad school in my late 20s. And so my brain sort of works in sequences. I don't, sort of have a creative side, but it's pretty limited. So let me talk about what I think is the ordinal order of priority here, or what we ought to do in order. Acquisitions and dispositions will be next week. After that, we'll do purchase and sale contracting. What do contracts look like in our purchase and sale? And Darren Harrell, our real estate guy, will do that one. Third week will be underwriting. What happens on the front end of a deal when our acquisitions department is trying to figure out whether we acquire something or not, and we're digging down into the numbers and the details? How does the underwriting department work and what does it do? How do we underwrite our deals? Third, capital stack development and function. One of the things our leader and commander, Kip Sowden, will tell you, I think, he and I have been together now for 5 years, and I think I can speak for him on this. The capital stack is the thing that always develops last in a deal. But it's just about, other than finding the deal and trying to figure out whether we can make that deal work, the capital stack is just about the most difficult part of what we do in our deal making. And so we got to spend some time on capital stack development and function, what it looks like, what it could look like from one deal to another. And we run across a whole sort of panoply of different kinds of financings depending upon the deal, what its economic likelihoods are, how those cash flows are going to develop, and the like. That drives from underwriting largely, but then it involves our financing people as well. So we'll talk about capital stack development function. And we'll talk about financings, and specifically I'm talking about debt now, not equity. When I mention financings, both agency, we do a lot of agency debt, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in our multifamily product, and then bridge financings, which would be, and traditional commercial financings, which you'll find in our development entities, ground up. We borrow money, we do construction development financings, sometimes land acquisition financings. Those are fairly straightforward as financings go. But then we also get into bridge financings that get a whole lot more complicated because we're dealing with sophisticated lenders, and a lot of them in bridge financings may not be traditional banks. They may be other parties like real estate investment trusts and the like who have specialized terms that they're looking for. And those deals are heavily negotiated, and the documents are usually much more complicated than our traditional agency financings or standard acquisition financings. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about securities offerings, and I'm going to lead that one. That'll be on July 16th. But I'll talk about private offerings, the kinds of private offerings that we do. We don't do public offerings. We operate under specific kinds of Regulation D exemptions from public offerings. And so we'll run through what one of those looks like, and we'll probably grab a PPM, maybe even one that's current, that we're currently working on at the time. We'll get copies of it for you out here, and we'll flip through it and look at what parts there are to them and why we think those things are important. Next thing we'll do is we'll talk about property management. You know, it's one thing to acquire a business, and every property we acquire, unless we develop it from ground up, every property we acquire is an existing operating business. And understanding how that business works and how it's not working well and what can be done to make it better is the charge and the call of our property management folks down at Reef Residential. Every group that I'm talking about in these sections and that we'll talk about today, they're experts at what they do. I mean, we are fortunate to be a group of people, a team of folks that over a period of time have developed real and have brought really developed expertise in, but have really developed and honed expertise here in ways that make our synergies work together. And Reef Residential is a critical part of what happens on that front, because it's not enough to make a great deal, paper it up, and then buy it and close. We have to do something with it to be successful and get our investors not only return their money, but returns for them, and make our residents happy, and a whole bunch of other things. Lots of balancing goes on in that. And then the last substantive section will be ground-up development. I thought we'd just take a turn at what does it look like when you buy a piece of dirt and turn that into something that is a significantly different kind of undertaking from our going out in the acquisition team and looking for a portfolio of properties like you guys will be involved in all summer long with the what are we calling it, transcoastal, or I don't know what name we've come up with these days. But right, the transcoastal right now, yeah, it's the 20. What are we calling it, Brad?
I think Atlantic 25.
The Atlantic 25. Okay, so it's 20, somewhere between 25. But you'll see and hear a lot about that this summer. There's a lot of contracting going on, but that's very different from what, for example, Bruce and Carl work on regularly. And one of the projects we're working on right now is I think we're headed toward getting ready to close, probably not till about the 1st of August, when you guys are about going back, on a piece of land down in Galveston on the beach and developing a Galveston Beach hotel type resort. And that's a very different project. We also have residential communities. We'll talk about that in a second. We just bought 3,300 acres down in Midlothian, and we'll put apparently 8,500 approximately rooftops up, along with schools. And I mean, we won't build the schools, but there'll be schools and utility infrastructure and a whole bunch of other things. So as you can imagine, those kinds of projects are very different from acquiring an existing asset and then managing it off. Okay, so that's what we'll do. And then I thought the last session, unless we really get, you guys have a subject as we go through this, if you all have a subject that you really want to cover that you don't hear covered, and we'll send this out. And again, this is just a go-by. I thought we'd just do a wrap-up on the August 6th session, give you guys a Q&A opportunity, and we can just talk about where you are, what you're thinking, and what you think you'd like to know more about. Okay? And again, if as we go along, there are things you'd like to know more about, more detail, those sorts of things, feel free to email me. I'm an advisor. I'm available to any of you all the time, and so just feel free to email me. If I've got resources that I feel like are appropriate for you to read, I may send you a link to something that will help you, get some more understanding about that particular issue you're concerned about. Okay? This is about resources. teaching. All right, so having said that, Mr. Holzman is our COO. Jeff, would you like to add any words to the opening today?
Of course. So first of all, welcome everybody. I think you guys are very lucky, to be quite honest, to be in this forum, to be in this room, and to have somebody like Cragle stand up in front of you and kind of tell you all about our company and how we do commercial real estate. Many of you come from really excellent schools, and I'm sure you understand the value of a great education. Listen, Reef is not perfect. As you'll find out, nobody's perfect. But what we are is we're an experienced, forward-thinking organization. We have procedures and policies and departments, and those departments are led by experienced experts with proven track records in their field. I think this summer is an opportunity for you to learn a lot about this industry, to network, to probably meet and impress some really key people in the industry, and I'm sure many of you will end up working for us. And even those of you who won't, you are probably going to benefit from this summer and everything you're about to learn in this series and the time you spend at Reef. You're going to take that with you for many, many years. You're going to meet people that you do business in the future. You're going to reference concepts and names and formulas and everything that you hear throughout the summer. So I really am genuinely excited for you, and I think you've already made it if you're sitting in this room. The series is being recorded, and we're using that sort of as a footprint for the future as we train new employees, both junior and senior. It gives everybody a chance to kind of sit through the videos that you're about to sit through in person and learn about the company. Now, let me just tell you one thing as it's kind of a closing thought. Every company is different. Even if they're in the same industry, even if they've been around for the same amount of time, they're different in the sense of their DNA, how they do things, how they approach deals. And the composition of that company DNA is all about the people. And as you listen to the series, and as you have multiple leaders from Reef come and stand and talk in front of you, look at the personalities of those people. Look at how genuine they are, how professional they are, how they pay attention to details. It could be boring at times, but that is what makes it, that's what kind of takes it to the next level. That is the DNA of the people that contribute to the DNA of the company, which makes us different. And like I said, we're not perfect, nobody is. But every time we do a deal, every time we do a transaction, we debrief it. We learn from it. What did we do well? What did we do wrong? What can we do better next time? And we put all that in writing. We have a 250-page company manual that describes what we do and how we do it. It's confidential, but you will see it. And I think that you guys in the room are already part of this process. As you listen and as you learn, we will also look to you for your ideas, your feedback from the things that you've seen. Sometimes, a fresh set of eyes can see something that Cragle and I and Bruce and I are in the weeds every day we don't see. So I'm excited for you. I think you're going to have a great summer. I think you're going to benefit tremendously. Keep your eyes and ears open, because I think this is going to be super meaningful for all of you, without exaggerating, for years down the road. With that, that's all I have. I'll shut up. I'll let Cragle take the lead, but I'm here on the line. Cragle, thank you.
This is a page out of, as Jeff suggested, the 250-page tome, and it grows daily. The Reef Holdings Company Policies and Procedures Manual, which absolutely is an incredible work and a very difficult, time-consuming underwriting. And thank you to Jeff and Allie and others who are working on this thing all the time. It's truly incredible that from a process perspective, we're reducing what we do on a regular basis into policies and procedures that new people can come to the show, we'll call it the show, can come to the show, sit down and read through their section of the manual and say, this is how we do it here. This is what's going to happen if I get asked to do that particular task. So I'd like to add to Jeff's remarks. I agree that, and have agreed all along, we have an amazing group of extremely talented and continue to recruit and have come on extremely talented people who are very capable, detail-oriented, able to be creative at the same time, not just simply do the same thing over and over again, find better ways to do the things we've done before. It's always nice to have fresh thought come into the room, so to speak. And so refining our processes doesn't necessarily, like with Memorex, doesn't necessarily mean that process is always going to be there or always be used. We continue to modify and use new processes, substitute processes that will make us even better, that will help us jump in, sort of into the next arena. And on to the next arena concept. We're in a very interesting place right now at Reef Holdings. That is, we've seen over the last 5 years, I came here in August of 16, we've seen over the last 5 years this company grow from what I would refer to, I'm a long-term entrepreneurial practice lawyer. So I've seen a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses and help them grow until they get to the place where they get sold to a private equity firm or a publicly traded company that wants to take them over for cash flow purposes or that sort of thing. And so I constantly lose clients, help them grow, and then I lose the client to somebody else. But this has happened here. We've seen incredible growth over the last 5 years, and we're now at the stage where, and I've mentioned this to executive leadership here, I regard what's happening right now at Reef as us moving from an entrepreneurial acquisition and development firm into an institutional acquisition and development firm. We are moving toward institutional patterning, and that's exactly what this sort of pattern works, how it works. And this sort of education process that we're talking about here, adding an academy for new folks when they come in, is part of that institutional passage of knowledge. Take institutional knowledge and find ways to pass it to you so that you have an idea of what it is we think and how we do it, so that you can easily and quickly fit into, with your talent level, easily and quickly fit into the process and find your way. So one of the things that I love about this organization, and I'm not quite sure exactly where we are on this, but there's a book, and I've passed this around to some of the senior leadership here a while back, called Help the Helper. This is not a promotion for the book Help the Helper, by the way, just for the camera. Kevin Pritchard and John Elliott wrote this book a few years back, and it's a book, the byline is called Building a Culture of Extreme Teamwork. Help the Helper. And he gives us an example in here that is exemplary of what we do here at Reef, so I'm just going to give you the quick example. We've all been in a restaurant before, been sitting at a table, and a fork or a knife drops on the floor, right? Everybody's been in that situation. So at a level 1 service organization at a restaurant, you have to wait or ask for your waiter or waitress to give you another knife or fork. That's a level 1 organization under their model. A level 2 organization, service organization, what you'd see happening in that setting is another waiter or waitress would go, whoa, okay, and pick it up off the floor and bring another one over. That's a level 2. A level 3, and the most successful organizations, not just in restaurants, but in every industry, these guys studied them for decades, the most successful are those teams of people where, in a restaurant, when the fork or knife hits the floor, the maitre d', just about every other waiter or waitress in the place, the bus boys, all hear it, see it, and no matter what they're busy doing, they stop and they go fix the problem. The client never has to ask. That's teamwork. That's somebody not saying, oh, well, that's not my responsibility. That's someone else's responsibility. They need to do that job. Not what happens on a football field. I can tell you that from practical experience. Real teamwork, somebody picks up the slack when a guy gets by, right, on the way in. That's how it happens. This is the kind of organization you're in here at Reef. People will figure out a way to fill in the gaps and make things happen. It's one of the reasons I love this place. And I think many of us feel that same way about it. So let's work toward, and you guys think about being in an organization, at a level 3 organization, that helps the helper. And what we need to do here and what we're doing here is getting you ready to help others by providing you with a wider access to information about who we are and what we do. All right, so let's get right into that. So what are we going to do today? Who's Reef and what do we do? Well, clearly you all know that we're a real estate development firm in very sort of wide format, but we do a whole lot more than just simple real estate development. As we've already talked through our departmental levels, there are lots and lots of functions of what we're doing. And if you think of the areas we're in multifamily, we're in multifamily not only in existing assets, but also ground up acquisition of land and sites. Just finished one in Kerrville, still working on one right now north of Memphis, in Gallatin, Tennessee. So that's the multifamily sort of sector. We have a hotel, a hospitality division that is primarily beachfront, although, again, back to ground up again. We just opened the Delta Marriott in Southlake, north of the DFW airport. And if you haven't been out there, you need to get out there. It is a great place. It's beautiful. The restaurant's fabulous. And it has become the local sort of hot spot for people to go and have dinner there in Southlake. It's very successful. Very high-end chef that was recruited from Dean Faring's restaurant here at the Ritz. The Ritz. Absolutely fabulous menu. Love the staff out there and the restaurant folks. They're incredible. So I suggest you go out there. We've opened a ground up that we in Charleston, South Carolina, about a little bit more than a year ago now. Downtown Charleston that is finally coming out of the sort of COVID thing, and after about March or so has been very successful. We've been excited about that. It's a great little property. I've been there and stayed at it. It's a wonderful place. So, and we have a hotel in Cocoa Beach. We have several along the Gulf Coast side, and then a few on the Atlantic seaboard as well. So we do some of that. And then we do ground up. We do community things. As I said, we've got the Midlothian project going on now, and we're looking at this hotel project down on the beach in Galveston, which will be again an extremely interesting project and one that will take years of development time to get ready. So we do, and so we're mostly in the southeastern United States, as you probably know. 10 states. I always say, Texas east, south of the Mason-Dixon line. That's kind of where we are, except Louisiana. We're not in Louisiana. Don't know when we might do Louisiana. I'm just not sure. As many of you probably know, the law is completely different in Louisiana. It's the Napoleonic Code law, unlike the other 49 states in the United States, which are all what we call English common law states. And so the world is very different over, across the Sabine River. Is that the Sabine? I can't remember. Anyway, on the east side of the river, when you go into Louisiana, it's not just a different culture, it's a different legal world over there. So I think we've avoided it for those reasons, but not sure. In any event, so this is what we do, and we try to provide value to not only our investors, but to our hotel users and our tenants and others that will use our facilities. And so what market are we really in? In other words, what sort of strata of the market are we in? Are we in 5-star hotels? Absolutely not. Are we in 4 stars? I think only one, right? Just the Delta Marriott.
Yeah, the Delta actually just got awarded the mobile for AAA.
4 diamonds. Wow. Wow, that's great. It's their highest grade. Wow.
It's really an upscale product.
Yeah.
In the chain scale of hospitality, so
that's right.
It's out. I think it's outdone itself a little bit for the category of which it is.
Received the award.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. I understand. Yeah. Well, that's great. But where's our normal market? Our normal market is somewhere down in the middle. both in our hospitality and in our residential settings. And our fearless leader likes to refer to it, and I think it's an apt description entirely, and that is workforce. These are people who rent by need and need a clean and safe place to live, and they need to be able to pack their kids and themselves into a car or an SUV or a van or something and drive to the beach to have a family vacation. They can't throw everybody in an airplane and go fly to some fancy place. These are people who have budgets to live by, but they need to take their families to these places that are some destinations they can enjoy and be safe, comfortable, happy, and have a good time. And that's what we try to provide. That's the market we serve day in, day out here at Reef. And so you'll find that we're not talking about, this is unusual, we're not talking about four diamond kind of stuff, but we're talking about service that cares and that provides real value at that level. That's what we try to do every day here at Reef. So what we do behind the scenes here is make sure that the projects we work on conform to those kinds of things, and that if there are issues or problems that we think can't be overcome, that create barriers that make it difficult, very difficult, or unlikely for us to be successful to serve that market, then we simply say, no, we'll move on and go do something else, right? There are other opportunities. So just understand that's the market segment that we generally serve day in and day out. So how do we do what we do? Well, wait, one more section for a second. Who's our leadership? Of course, y'all have met Kip Sowden, our CEO. Quick story about that. I always have called Kip Cap, Captain. Right? I call him, hey Cap, how you doing? What are we doing today? That sort of thing. That's always been my moniker with him, has been with Cap. And as I thought this morning about what my intro was going to be and what I was going to say today about him when I introduced him, I was hoping he was going to be here today, but he's out of the office today. That's fine. But I thought before my intro, I I probably should have a while ago started calling him Commodore, because there's more than one ship in the fleet, right? And then it occurred to me that that's probably not even right anymore. It's probably Admiral now instead of Commodore or Captain. So anyway, so Admiral Sowden is our fearless leader. Really, with the rest of the board, generates policy and decides which directions we're going, what additional lines of product or services we're going to provide. His able leadership's brought us to where we are today, and I expect as long as, God willing, the creek don't rise and he's healthy, we'll see that leadership continue, on for a while. I certainly hope so. So, and then we have Doug Mcknight, who, and I'm sorry, I haven't kept up, unfortunately, with all the name change, not the name changes, but the positional changes. Is Doug the president now? I can't remember. Yeah, okay, thank you.
President and Chief Investment Officer, CIO.
CIO, Chief Investment Officer, President and CIO, okay. Jeff Holzman is our Chief Operating Officer, and you guys have heard from him. Mitch Provosti is our CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and Lucian Tujak is the other primary partner at Reef Holdings. He's
Chairman of the board.
Yeah, he's the vice chairman of the board, and he's active behind the scenes, but and he travels a lot, and so we don't necessarily see him around here. And just to put two and two together for you, I have represented Lucian and his family and all of his business dealings, all the business deals he's done since about 2000. So we work closely together. In fact, we're closing a deal today, right now, as we speak. That's going on. So that's the sort of the principal original group, and then we've got a number of other senior executive folks that are in charge of departments. Some of those guys are in charge of departments, and we'll go through those as we go through the departments quickly. So what are our departments and what do they do? Thank you, sir. I looked at the alphabetical listing of these positions and decided I'd just sort of put them in the order in which they occur in a transactional setting or in our business setting. So we're going to just start out with acquisitions. We have an acquisitions department, which happens to be the first one in the upper left. Actually, this may, it's not quite in the order I would put it in, but acquisitions, so what do they do? So their acquisitions are obviously involved in sourcing and then underwriting, doing marketing analysis, due diligence, and sales negotiation back and forth in our acquisitions and also in our dispositions. So the acquisitions department is really, in some respects, also the group that's working on dispositions because they have to do the opposite side of it. When we get ready to, thank you, when we get ready to price out a sale and determine what we think we really need to have, underwriting's back involved again, analytics is involved, a bunch of people are involved in determining exactly what that price needs to look like, and therefore what our negotiation is going to be over it, and then when to go to market with it, when it's appropriate to go to market with it. So that's our acquisitions department. The next department I have is capital expenditures. CapEx is really not an acquisitions-related department, although we could have CapEx involved and usually do at some level involved in our acquisitions. But this may be something where we get halfway into a project and realize that in order to appeal to the market differently, we need to invest some more money than we thought we were going to, and those folks, our capital expenditures folks, will get involved in analyzing, figuring out what has to happen there and whether we can make that work. Our underwriting department obviously underwrites our deals, crunches the numbers. They're the number crunchers. They develop, the spreadsheets. How many of you are involved in underwriting? Are any of you involved in underwriting? Are you helping out with underwriting? Yeah. You get to get deep down into the theoretical constructs that end up in formulas. So if you're not a happy math person, it's not something that you'd really get into. But it's a neat deal. And one of the things that also occurs to you when you see it happening, if you haven't watched it happen, and I hope you get an opportunity to do it, that is, go in and talk through an underwriting with Chris or Darren or Bobby and ask them to flip down through a spreadsheet with you and show you the categories of things that they are dealing with at a detailed level on a line item basis, and it will be extraordinary to you the number of issues that are embedded in those models and how sensitive they are to changes in particular parts of those models. And that's part of what underwriting does, is a sensitivity analysis to figure out just how it's going to work when we get a hold of it, and then what we think the market's going to do or not do, what financing costs will do, if it changes during our diligence period and the like. All that goes into underwriting. They're masters over there. I love the underwriting guys. Capital, wrong place. Capital markets, Reef Capital Partners. Our capital markets folks and Reef Capital Partners are our groups that do what you think they do. They go out and find us financing. They find us both debt financing and equity financings. So how do they find us equity financings? Obviously debt, they're out shopping for lenders, both bridge lenders and traditional banks that offer Fannie Mae financing or Freddie Mac financing. Those are the agencies, the federal, the agency debt that we're talking about for multifamily in particular. There are a variety of different kinds of lenders, both traditional banks and non-traditional lenders, that have a wide variety of underwriting procedures and parameters. And the guys over here in capital markets, they're experts at knowing what kind of fit a lender will have with the kind of deal that we're talking about and its particular underwriting profile, and the probable collateral that will come along with it, and the exposure in the market to the lender in the market. And so, for example, we've got another ground-up development that's going on in Salado, Texas right now. We bought about 23 acres, and we're just subdividing it up into a multifamily piece that's about 10 acres. We're going to have one other multifamily piece, probably condos in one place, and then potentially a small, single-family unit development of some kind or another. And so planning those kinds of things out and then trying to underwrite to them and then find lenders for each parts of those projects is not easy. And in fact, in a project like that or in a project like Midlothian, it's entirely possible we could end up with, in the Salado project, we could end up with 4 different lenders lending to each of the subparts of the project one at a time as we develop them. Single lender may not come in for the entire project. In fact, it's unlikely one would. They won't want to take the risk of the entire development, right? They understand portfolio theory. And so the guys in capital markets are out looking for that all the time and looking to match profiles that they know about financing parties with our deals and get term sheets to us that then our underwriting folks and senior management can look at, our investment committee can look at and make determinations about. Is this one going to work? Go. And at that point, it then turns into something else. It now turns into a deal that needs to be turned into paperwork and closed. So, and we'll get to that in a minute. So that's capital markets. And then Reef Capital Partners is our Doug and Rod Hines. And they are licensed securities brokers and registered investment advisors. And so they're out in the marketplace looking for, and in fact, we just negotiated and are signing a deal today with a securities firm from the Northeast through which Reef Capital Partners works to acquire larger equity investor pieces for our projects and bring them in. Okay, so that's what they do. They go source that sort of equity. So that's Reef Capital Partners, and so now we have sort of the debt and equity part, that what we refer to as the capital stack in our acquisitions. And then we have, I put investor relations next, and that's headed up by Dari. And what does investor relations do? Well, it does about what it sounds like, but not quite. Because Dari is out on the front end of every one of our deals, even if Reef Capital Markets goes out and raises, let's say we have to raise $15 million in equity for a deal. Reef Capital Markets may go out and raise 5 to 8 of that, or maybe 10 of that out of that 15. And the other 5, where does that come from? Any idea? LPs. And what are LPs? Just individual investors. What is that? What does LP mean? Limited partner. Limited partner. Okay. So that's right. That's one way that it gets referred to in the marketplace. I'm a bit technical, so we don't have LPs here. We use limited liability companies, and they're called members. So instead of limited partners, but that's right. The use of the term LP suggests that it's a passive investor that's coming in with money only under a private securities investment. Usually it's private securities. There are public LPs, limited partnerships, but will come in and invest money into one of our deals in one of our securities offerings that we'll talk about later in the summer, that we conduct on nearly every, if not every, project that we work on and do. We are doing a private securities offering under Reg D to raise that kind of money. So that's what investor relations is out front, talking to investors constantly about what our current portfolio is and what we're currently doing and what they're doing, what their results are as it comes out of asset management, but also pre-talking with investors and providing pre-investment information to the extent that we can do that under the securities laws, which we do very carefully. So that's what investor relations does. Our closing department is a new department. Jeff, do you want to talk about the closing department?
Yeah, of course, I can say a few words about that. The closing department is a relatively new concept. It does exist in the industry, so you'll see it. It's sometimes called the transaction department, the closing or the deal team. This is for us a little bit of a kind of a special situation. One of our more senior executive vice presidents, Brad, leads that department.
I'm in here, Jeff.
It's different in the sense that the closing team, the deal team, will basically kick into gear whenever there's one of three things: an acquisition, a disposition, or some type of refinance. It's anything that has a closing. And then what Brad will do is he will basically coordinate all the resources at Reef, specifically legal, asset management, capital markets, and he'll start running through a very detailed 3-page checklist to make sure that we show up with closing ready to go with all the information that we need. It's easy to just transact, right? We do business, we shake hands, but in real estate, where the law mandates that practically everything has to be done in writing, there are tons and tons of titles, insurances, financial, a lot of stuff that you have to collect, and it all has to be ready for the closing, because the closing is the one period of time where everything exchanges hands, including ownership and money, and that's when the deal actually closes. And we'll sometimes do multiple closings at the same week. We're buying something, we're selling something, and we're refinancing something all at the same time. So Brad is actually and his team are in the weeds with all of the required documents, the required parties at the right time. It's one of those places where if you work with Brad, if you work through a transaction, you'll hear so many acronyms and so much terminology, because and a lot of this is checklist driven, right? They'll literally go step by step to make sure that they have everything. And it's not as simple as just collecting the documents. Some of those documents don't exist. So Brad will actually have to drive that process of like, hey, you guys have 7 days to create this statement, that then review it and signed off. The last thing I want to say about the deal team and the closing department is how important it is. This is one of those situations where if you get a decimal point wrong, or if you forget to add a certain bill, guess what? It's too late. The closing is that one time when we exchange title for money, whether we're buying or selling, and it's over. It's practically impossible to come back and say, oh, we forgot to add that. So it really is a detail-oriented team. That's all I have.
Thank you. Yeah, and that is something that traditionally transactional lawyers have handled and driven substantially that process. And we've done that here for the duration until the closing team has really started. And Brad's addition to it has been very helpful for us, because it allows us in the legal team to continue to focus on those detailed lists of things that we're working on with people on the other side or with the title company, while behind the scenes, Brad is making sure that all of the other things that we wouldn't ordinarily be involved in also get done. And then he'll check back with us from time to time on things that we're responsible for in the legal team, and he'll just want to know where are we on that, or is that being done, who's handling it, and the like. It's very helpful to have that overarching sort of view that allows someone to make sure that the details are all handled before we sign the dotted line, so to speak. Next, so once we buy a property, it seemed logical to me to hand it off to property management. So if we're talking about, and it wouldn't matter whether we were talking about hospitality, a hotel we acquire has to have hotel management. Now that's not Reef Residential. That would be an outside hotel management expert, and we sign contracts for usually long terms with people like Innisfree or Interstate Aimbridge is a very large hotel management group, or others. And we negotiate those deals with them. They come in and contract, and then they handle all the management of the hotel, for example. Just like Reef Residential, when we are done with the closing and we hand that off, they bring their team in and they go through a property. They make sure that they're ready to go. The accounting records have flipped over, that everything else is ready to go. Leasing is all seamless, and they're on the ground making sure that it happens our way, the Reef way, not the old way, and that there's differences that are going on. They start that process long before we get to closing, and usually have made deal decisions, that is staffing decisions and the like, before we get to a closing, so they have some idea. It's not all happening on closing day or the day after, worse yet. Lindsay, do you have anything else to add on property management?
We're very involved in even the CapEx, getting the CapEx stuff done. We're very involved in the performance. We're very involved in a lot of aspects as relates to bringing any acquisition on and helping with the dispositions as well. So
Right. Yeah, there's a ton. So we're going to talk about, I'll get to the accounting department. Those of us who are in departments that I would call general service arms of the company, I'll get to those last. But Reef Residential has its own accounting staff internal to it that's separate from the accounting department that's up here at Reef Holdings. And they specialize in property management accounting, and they are down there digging through the numbers and grinding it out every single day. So it's a tremendous amount of work that goes into every property. And if you think about this as a business, for those of you that are headed sort of toward a business practice or a business career, if you think about running and operating a business, you not only have revenue generation, and whether you're a manufacturer or a service provider, you've got employees, you have tax, you have contracting, you have customer relationships, you have all of that sort of stuff, right? And every one of these properties is a separate business that has to have capable staff and capable executive management to be able to run that business. And now if you think about it,
each state has its own laws. So
That's right.
understanding each state laws is also very important.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about we're not just talking about landlord-tenant laws. We're talking about responsibility for privacy of information that's different. We're talking about how financings are different there, how the tax law is different there, and then obviously we have things that we worry about like slip and fall and injuries, and the law differs from state to state. Even in common law states, the law differs across jurisdictions. So yeah, this is you just have to deal with it, kind of constantly. It's always something new. But if you just imagine we're running, almost 50 businesses. Reef Residential's downstairs running almost 50 businesses at the same time. Now, it's extraordinary when you think about the amount of information and the number of people, right? The number of people that are required. And so now we're off into the size of the admiral's ship in the fleet. It's, takes some time to get that ship to turn, right? And that's what Jeff and the team are doing, coming up with this guidebook. So we're down to just a few minutes. Let me see if I can get through these quickly. Asset management. Bruce, you want to speak to asset management for a minute?
Sure. And once the deal closes, it flips to asset management. We get involved in the upfront too. Once the deal kind of is in the closing mode, we got to work on making sure property taxes, insurance, and things like that are taken care of. But if you really think about it, when the property's closed and it flips over to ownership, we're really kind of the overseers of the investment. So we work very closely with property management. We oversee what they're doing with looking at the numbers and going back and forth and questioning whether certain CapEx, whether those numbers are right, wrong, get involved with them on the bids to handle a lot of the improvements on the property. Working, just closely with, every year we're reviewing our insurance program to make sure that we have right insurance in place, because we have a lot of assets that are affected by windstorm. Just think about where our hotels are. So we always look about where we can improve efficiencies as far as like expenses and save money to ownership. On the hotel side, very involved and working with all the hotel managers. I have a very deep hotel background, both from a lender and an owner. So we're just, I think, I know we're going to talk about asset management in one of these sessions, so I'll get into the details a little bit more, but really we're the stewards of the investment. We oversee it. We have to make sure that everything is going according to business plan. We're extremely important, and it's a lot of things that fall on our shoulders.
Thank you. So analytics is, I'm assuming, a subcategory or sub-function, right, within asset management. And what does analytics do?
The way we frame it is asset management is now a division. To go back into your, drawing your naval analogy, this is more of a fleet, right? So this is a division. The division that Bruce leads includes multiple departments, one of which carries the same name, asset management, but also the analytics, the IR, and the CapEx. The analytics team is sort of a staple of the 21st century, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, nobody had an analytics department, but now that everything is so data-driven and technology is such a big part of what we do, we literally track hundreds, sometimes even thousands of different metrics about every single one of these properties. How much money was it bought for? Where is it? How many units does it have? How many units are online? What's the average rent? What's the average bedroom bath breakdown? What's the average delinquency in percentage in dollars? How does it compare to the performer? There's hundreds of different metrics that we track across every single one of these assets. And sometimes we track metrics before we even operate. Even the acquisitions department, they start collecting metrics that we analyze if we wanted to buy. So our analytics department is in charge of basically operating all of these different systems where all the metrics get filled in. So at the end of the day, our investment committee can click a button and see, visualize really, and we'll show you as we go through the series, you'll see our visual dashboards. We literally are able to visualize every single asset and see all of these metrics. And because it's technology driven, if one of the metrics hits a certain threshold, a good one or a bad one, we can color code it. So for example, we'll show you the screen where we look at all of our assets on a map, literally on a Google Maps kind of view. And if anything is under a certain DSCR ratio, whether a certain occupancy ratio, whether a high delinquency ratio, it's literally highlighted in red. And it tells us, hey, you need to look at this because there's a problem here. All that would not work if it was not for the analytics department collecting all that data, manipulating it, and putting it in the right place.
That's great. Thank you for that. It's helpful to understand where that fits. So, and then there are 4 divisions that I really regard as going together under what I would refer to as ground-up development or development projects. We have Reef Development Services. Carl Schwab heads that up. He's there. He's the old guy there in the middle of the table. The only reason I can say that is because he's the older guy in the firm. I'm next, just so you know. Yeah, so I get to say that to him. He gives me a hard time all the time, and it's okay. We're old enough we can take it. We should be by now anyway. So we've got Reef Development Services. We have Reef Construction Services. That is exactly what it sounds like. It's our construction contractor. They're over yonder in the fish tank over there, not the shark tank, but the fish tank. We have Extended Stay, which is our division that is involved in ground-up development of extended stay hotels. We have one going up in Missoula, Montana right now, a second one under contract to buy the land in Boise, Idaho. And in fact, yours truly owes one of the development guys my comments to the franchise agreement, and I promised him I'd get him to him before I started this today, and it's still sitting on my desk, almost ready to go out, but I couldn't finish it. I needed to get over here. And then Reef Communities is Shannon Livingston, and that's really, we're going to be developing communities, and the Midlothian project would be an example of more of a community development rather than simply single ground-up development like a hotel in a specific place. Well, it'll involve community. It'll involve single family. It'll involve apartments, multifamily in the same deal. It'll involve probably some strip and shopping center and the like. It could very well involve medical or older folks.
So we're doing with under Reef Communities, we're doing everything from municipal infrastructure, what we call lot, which is essentially single-family homes that we'll either build or contract out to builders, as well as multifamily. So when you think about it, it literally is an opportunity to be involved in designing and building a neighborhood from scratch, including stuff that goes underground from utility and sewage and power. It's a big project, but by definition, Reef Communities only does big projects. Reef Communities will not handle building one multifamily or just a lot with 5 homes. We'll do communities, which we define as neighborhood and above. Right.
And then our support services groups are, and I'm trying to finish this up and be respectful of everybody's time. We're right at 1 o'clock. We have an accounting department up here. Stacy Shattle heads that up and works with them. We have a human resources department, a couple people in human resources. They are down on the second floor. Then we have general administration folks, and we have legal. There are, as we speak, 4 lawyers and 3 paralegals in the legal department, and we're overrun. So anyway, anybody have any questions, Q&A at this point? Any general sort of questions on either the process for the summer or anything else you'd like to ask about today? Anybody? I do have one question for those of you who are interns. Those of you who are not don't have to answer this. How many of you sit in the front row of your classrooms? Okay. It's telling. It's telling. Tells me something about who you are and how you think. Okay. Thank you very much. This has been great.
I want to say one word about Reef. You often hear us describe the company as a vertically integrated real estate developer, vertically integrated real estate firm. And if you've ever wondered what that means, it's exactly what Cragle just talked about. It means that throughout the entire, this is where vertical comes from, if you go up and down the chain, the value chain of how commercial real estate is transacted, we have all of that in-house. So you may see other firms that have a much smaller organization, 4 or 5 principals along with very basic admins, and they're not exaggerating, they are a real estate firm. But whenever they do a deal, they probably get it through a broker. We have our own acquisitions team, our own acquisitions department. They probably hire a law firm to transact, to perform the PSA, and perform the due diligence. We have that in-house. Once they buy it, they give it to an experienced asset manager or an asset management firm that charges 1 or 2% per year. We have our own team of that in-house. Almost always, they'll hire a property management firm, some of the bigger names in the country that you may have heard of. We have that in-house. There's a lot of people that work in our property management. It's a fully owned subsidiary of Reef. Accounting, we don't outsource that. We have our own people. That's good and bad, right? Like everything else in life, that's a strategic decision that Reef made. On the one hand, it costs a lot of money. We have about 300 people on the payroll, and whether we transact or not, we got to pay those people every month. That's a liability, it's a burden. But on the other hand, we keep all of that knowledge in the company. Everything from property management to legal to accounting to asset management, every one of those guys and girls, they do something, they learn. And as long as we retain them, the knowledge gets built and improved in the company. And it's a gamble. It's a gamble that our senior leadership decided to take. But if we do it well, and that's what the manual is for, and that's what all the annual meetings are for, and that's why you're in the room as well, because we're trying to get all the knowledge to percolate, to remain and get better, and then over time, instead of just training people that go work somewhere else, we benefit from the tremendous knowledge. So even when we make a mistake, as long as we understand that the debrief is that knowledge is within the company, and that's what makes a vertical integrated developer like Reef, if successful, very hard to stop. That's what it means. Not long.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. And next week will be acquisitions and dispositions.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.